Hi, this is Tucker with your SAT vocabulary list number 2. Please take Cornell notes, write down the word, the part of speech, the definition, and any example I say or that you think of that will help you to remember these words. And please feel free to pause the recording if at any point I'm going too fast. The first word is abdicate, and it's a verb, and it means to give up. And it's typically used in reference to giving up power, so royal power or something similar. And oftentimes, a king or someone of power might have to abdicate a throne or a position of power because some other ruler or leader has conquered them or taken over. And so the symbol of the crown and abdicating the crown is one that helps me to remember this word. Achromatic describes anything that is colorless. When I arrived in Alaska, it was so gray and fogged in that the landscape was achromatic. It was totally colorless. The ground was all muddy. There was very little color at all. Another thing I think of when I think of achromatic or the absence of color are old photographs where they're only black and white, so it's black, white, and gray, lacking any kind of actual color. Number 3 is boorish, and boorish describes anyone who is rude, and rude in the sense that they're kind of like in your face. And I think of like a boar, the animal, when I think of this word. It just helps me to remember that it means rude and almost like aggressively in your face. So this picture of this man kind of being really aggressive with this woman in his conversation with her, I would describe him as being boorish in this moment. 4 is delusion. It's a noun, and it's a mistaken conviction, especially when it tends to be kind of enduring, which means you have it for maybe a little while, like a length of time. It's not a short mistaken conviction. So if you have a belief in something that's not actually true or isn't real or fact, that would be a delusion. And we describe people who have delusions as being delusional. Now, some people might think it's a delusion to believe in ghosts, while other people might feel like it's a delusion to believe in extraterrestrials. So, it a little bit depends on perspective, but it's any mistaken belief that tends to be kind of long-standing. 5 is evoke. It's a verb, and it means to call or summon or bring forth. So we might watch a really great movie that's really sweet and romantic, and it might evoke tears. Or you might watch a hilarious comedy, and it might evoke laughter. If you've ever spent any time with a little baby, they love faces. They love expressions. So if you get up in a little baby's face and you make crazy faces at them or you smile, you'll probably evoke giggles and laughter and smiles in that baby. Incompetence is the general lack of capacity or the general lack of ability or knowledge or fitness that is required to do something. And I am always stunned by incompetence when I run into employees at stores who don't know where things in the store are. That kind of incompetence drives me crazy. If I go into a store and you work in that store, I'm assuming you're going to know where stuff in that store is. And if I ask you a question and you don't know where it is, I'm going to be frustrated. Here's an example of this gentleman with very large puzzle pieces for a man his age, and he's not clearly able to put them together. So he doesn't have the competence. He is incompetent, we might describe him, and unable to put together a very simple puzzle. Number 7 is invaluable. And something that is invaluable is exceedingly, beyond precious. It's so precious, in fact, that it really is beyond value. You can't even imagine trading it for any kind of amount of money. So for a lot of us, our family is invaluable. You wouldn't trade it for anything. You can't even put an amount of money on how valuable your family is, or for some of us, our friendships. Some of us might have objects that people have given us that are invaluable to us, exceedingly precious. Number 8 is a monologue. Think of mono, meaning one. A monologue is a story or drama told or performed by one person. So if you've got one person on the stage acting out a story, then they are delivering or reading a kind of reciting a speech, they are delivering a monologue. However, there are definitely times when you can be with another person and they do all of the talking and it feels like a monologue instead of a dialogue. The dialogue being back and forth, whereas the monologue is just that person talking and you're kind of forced to listen. So it can be somebody on a stage or reading a story, performing a story, or it could just be used in the context of, oh my gosh, this person talks so much, it's like they're constantly delivering a monologue. Number 9 is passive, and someone who's passive is unresponsive. So you would describe them as being fairly, they're not going to react to things violently. They tend to just go with the flow. They don't get upset really easily. If someone shoves you and you're a passive person, you're not going to like it, but you're not going to shove them back. You're probably just going to shrug and be like, okay, and walk away. So an unresponsive person. I would imagine this cat looks pretty passive, pretty docile. If you walked in the room and you started making a meal, it doesn't look like this cat's going to get too freaked out or probably even really move. 10 is propaganda. Please make sure you spell this one correctly. So there is an O at the beginning and then all the rest are A's. And a lot of times students accidentally put an O where that first A is. So just make a mental note, propaganda, okay? It's a noun and this definition is not super helpful. It reads, any institution or systematic scheme for propagating a doctrine or system. So what you need to think about is it's any systematic way of kind of continuing a doctrine or a set of beliefs. So if you want to get a group of people to continue believing something, you use propaganda. So during World War II, the United States, after the Pearl Harbor was bombed, we used propaganda to demonize the Japanese, to make them seem less than human. And if you see some of the propaganda posters, Japanese people are almost portrayed like creatures, not like human beings. And that's very much on purpose because they wanted the American people to see them as less than human, so it would justify kind of our actions during the war. There was also propaganda in other countries for a variety of other things. So this is an example of one from Britain where they were trying to get women to leave the home and come into the factories to do work during the war to support the war effort as the men were fighting in the war. So you can see this woman, she's like hands up to like the sky. She's totally glorified, she's shining, and it's clear that her work in the factories is helping to make sure this war effort is going to be a success. So it's a way of trying to systematically get women to, consider helping the war effort going into the factories to work. Recluse is a person who lives in retirement or seclusion. So oftentimes these are people don't leave their house very often. They don't really want to interact with other people. There's even a spider that shares the same name that's known for kind of hiding in dark places. So anyone who doesn't want to leave their home, their comfortable environment, and go out into the world could be considered a recluse. 12 is subconscious, and think about sub meaning below our conscious kind of mind. So what happens or what's described as subconscious is anything being or occurring in the mind, but without you being aware or conscious of it. So all day long, things happen subconsciously in our mind. And so it's all of those things that happen without us being consciously aware of it. That's what we would describe as subconscious. So any of the actions or any of the things we say or do that we don't even really realize, those can also be done, they can be kind of considered subconscious. A lot of times I wonder what's happening in our subconscious, or what's subconsciously going on when we sleep. 13 is trajectory. It's a noun, and it's the path taken by a moving object. So the definition here says the path described by a projectile moving under given forces. But it's really point A to point B, the path something takes. And so when I think of like the classroom, if someone throws a paper airplane across the room, its trajectory is its point from point A, or its path from point A to point B, so across the room. And a lot of times if you're on an actual airplane, the seat in front of you will have one of those monitors where you can actually see the trajectory of your airplane from the city where you took off to the city where you're going to land. It's kind of fun to watch its trajectory as you're in the sky. 14 is vertigo. It's a noun, and it means dizziness. And vertigo can be caused by all kinds of things. It could be caused by an inner ear infection or an illness. When I had allergy season last year, my inner ear got swollen and I had vertigo for the first time. It was horrible and very unpleasant. It literally felt like the entire room around me was moving even though I was standing still. And I get motion sick. So some people get vertigo when they're on like a boat and they've been out at sea for a while, and it can make them feel nauseated too because everything around you feels like it's moving. So I could not look at this for very long without getting a sense of dizziness and feeling a little bit of vertigo as well. And 15 is wantonness. It's a noun, and it means recklessness. And wantonness, whenever I think of wantonness, I think of the recklessness in like young people's behaviors and choices. So sometimes teenagers' wantonness makes me nervous. Their desire to do dangerous things or to be really spontaneous and not really think about what they're doing. A lot of teenagers might be considered wanton and might demonstrate kind of this wantonness.